is disobedience. Now, what does this mean? It means if we, all of us here today, do not commit ourselves to ending abortion, abortion will never be ended, because delayed obedience is disobedience. We cannot just pray that abortion is going to be ended. We cannot just hope that abortion is going to be ended. Although those are good things, and we do hope and we do pray, but right here and right now, in this room, we all have to know that abortion will be ended in our lifetimes. By you showing up yesterday and walking through San Francisco, by you being here today, you have taken the first step and said yes. You have joined this movement that is so much bigger than us. So, we are going to learn today from 3 great speakers about how we can impact the abortion industry. And we know that we have this big industry in front of us, but we are very quickly, and we are quickly taking down this abortion industry because we are the pro-life generation, and we are going to abolish abortion. So please help me welcome Ken Connolly with Alliance Defending Freedom, Kathy Humbarger from Allen County Right to Life, and David Beeright, the former CEO of 40 Days for Life, to show us how we can impact the abortion industry.
Hello. Here, I'll use this one. Hello. Is this good? Caleb? All right. So, did everybody get a good lunch? Yes. All right. Are you ready to take down the abortion industry? Yes. Okay. So, I'm not going to be redundant with what I shared a little bit earlier about why industry impact is so critically important, but we're going to get into why you will be able to utilize specific strategies to save lives and to close down abortion centers in your community. I frankly am going to just give a little warm-up. The other 2 speakers are going to give you some unbelievable things. I would even say that some of the things you're going to hear in this session are some of the biggest potential leverage areas in the entire pro-life movement right now, and the vast majority of our movement doesn't even know they exist. So this is really an important session. So let me give you an example of what it looks like to impact the abortion industry as a leader. And we were talking with some of the student leaders just a few minutes ago about the importance of leadership. John Maxwell, a leadership expert, says everything rises and falls on leadership. And you on your campus you're the one who determines whether people's hearts and minds are changed. You're the one who determines whether somebody in need chooses a path that they will regret for the rest of their life, or they choose a path that they will never regret, the path of choosing life. You literally are influencing people through your action and through your inaction. So an example of this was a good friend of mine now, somebody I didn't know at the time, a guy named Ernie Cyr, C-Y-R. Ernie was a young man who had just moved to Pensacola, Florida. And when he moved to Pensacola, Florida, Ernie was a new pharmacist. So he went into his job as a pharmacist, and he had a young family. He went home one night from his pharmacy work. It was late at night, and he turned on his television, and there was a show on EWTN, the Catholic Television Network. And it was a short 30-minute documentary talking about 40 Days for Life. And this is before there was a national or international 40 Days for Life. But he was just talking about what had happened in one community when this had happened, this 40 days experience. So Ernie watched this, and he said, oh my gosh, this would be awesome. It sounds like something I could do while still working, while still being a husband and father. And he said, I think I'm going to do this. Now, unbeknownst to Ernie, this community he had moved to of Pensacola had a long history of all kinds of problems in the pro-life movement. There had been lots of infighting between groups. There had been lots of people who had stabbed each other in the back figuratively. And, regrettably, there had been instances in Pensacola, Florida, where people who opposed abortion, but were certainly not pro-life, bombed abortion facilities. So there was a long history. Had Ernie known this, he would never have said, let me step forward to do something. Because he would have said, oh, I got to stay away from that. He didn't know it. So he signed up to do a 40 Days for Life campaign. And as he started going around and talking to people, he found out, oh no, there's all this history here. But he was committed, and he and his young family said, well, we've got to press forward in doing this. So they led their first 40 Days for Life campaign. And during that, they had one absolutely profound moment. Ernie was trying to he's very involved in Sidewalk Advocates for Life, who have their table back here today. At that point, he had not been trained how to be an effective sidewalk advocate, but he said, I need to reach out to those people who are going in. This is the last chance I have to spare this woman from a life of regrets, the man who's with her, the same, to spare this child in the womb that's about to perish. And he said, I've got to do something. So he started to try to sidewalk counsel and to talk to these women. And this one woman was going in to the facility. He did his very best to reach out to her, and she just kind of like shied away, and she just kept walking faster into the abortion center. And Ernie's young child just began to sing, Jesus loves the little children. And the girl was about to grab the door, and she stopped. She turned around, and tears began streaming down her face. And she ran over and told Ernie's little daughter, I'm not going to have the abortion. And she chose life. So you could say, well, industry impact, that's not a huge thing. They saved a life that day by the grace of God, and that was money taken away from that abortion facility. So they continued on, and they've done multiple 40 Days campaigns, and since that time, not only that, they have now become a full-fledged Sidewalk Advocates for Life location, one of the strongest in that program. They've set up a group called the Emerald Coast Coalition for Life. Most of their volunteers are very, very young. And I was 2 weeks ago in Pensacola, Florida, they had a walk for life, and they had hundreds of people on a day that was 28 degrees in Pensacola, Florida. I didn't think it got below freezing in Florida, but it does. And so even in that miserable cold conditions where nobody wanted to come out, they had hundreds of people that came out for that walk. Abby Johnson was one of the other speakers there. But as I was talking with Ernie, I stayed at his house with his family that night, and he was sharing all of these different things that have happened. In the years from when he turned on his television late one night and saw something and said, I can do something to affect this challenge in my community, to today, it's been 10 years. And in that time, they have now done 20 40 Days for Life campaigns with support from all across their community. They have several thousand people involved in local efforts in their town. It's still a totally voluntary effort. Nobody is paid, all volunteers. And they have now seen 30 abortion workers leave their jobs and quit because of the people outside loving them and offering them help when they leave. And they have seen in their community a 47% reduction in abortions. 47%. And not only that, and here's where this ties into industry impact, they've seen 2 abortion facilities that have closed their doors and gone out of business for good. Now, one of those, this is so amazing, it was day 38 of their 40 Days for Life campaign when, unbeknownst to them, the abortionist had been found out to be evading his taxes and had huge, massive back non-paid taxes, and somebody found out about it and was able to bring that to light of enforcement agencies. That abortionist was shut down. He was put out of business on day 38 of this 40 Days campaign, but none of the people who were gathered outside praying even knew it. So they continued for 2 more days to pray and to be outside that facility. They wondered why are the doors closed, but they didn't know the facility had shut down. And they held their closing rally at the end of that 40 Days for Life outside of that place, praying for God to close down a place that had shut down 2 days earlier. Now, is that not amazing? But that's the kind of impact. One young man, his family, the people he recruited, the students who were involved, they have tons of students involved in their effort. That industry impact is phenomenal. So when you think about, you say, oh, I'm a student, I've got classes, and I'm working a part-time job, and I've got to keep my grades up, and can I really make a difference? The answer is yes, you can make a difference. You can make a life-saving difference, and even if it's just like his little daughter, that one life, it would be worth everything. But perhaps you can see in your community abortions reduced by 30, 40, 50%. Perhaps in your community you can help workers to leave the abortion industry by loving them out of their jobs. And perhaps you can see abortion centers in your town close their doors and go out of business for good. One of the most effective ways that I know to do that, certainly prayer, certainly the presence outside, the sidewalk counseling, but one of the most underutilized strategies, Kathy Humberger is going to be sharing about in just a couple of minutes, but I just want I want to set the stage for this. Of the 90 abortion centers that closed down following 40 Days for Life campaigns, I went back and started looking through all the circumstances that were related. Because certainly, as a person of faith, I credit God accomplished this. With Him, all things are possible. But I also realized He worked through people, and many times He worked through specific circumstances to bring those things about. just like somebody identifying the tax evasion of that abortionist, just like the whole Gosnell story when that became exposed, just like places that are closed down because they're simply not following the laws that are on the books. One of the best opportunities we have is to enforce existing laws that are on the books or existing regulations that affect the abortion industry. Father Frank Pavone said, I hope I'm not stealing a quote from you, is it okay? We can be redundant if we need to. Father Frank Pavone, he was here yesterday at the Walk for Life West Coast, has said for years, one cannot practice vice virtuously. So if you have an abortion industry that destroys the lives of innocent children without remorse, and that wounds women physically, emotionally, spiritually, and they profit from all of this, suffice to say, they have no problem lying, cheating, stealing. Is that fair to say? They will break laws, as David Daleiden related from this stage, without even a second thought, because to them the conscience is dumbed down, it's been deadened, and they are willing to do. And again, we pray for conversions, because when those workers come out, they're some of the best advocates to be able to help close down the abortion industry. But we have to realize that there are things going on inside every abortion facility in this country that are illegal, immoral, unethical. And if we can identify what those things are, and if we can document those things, and then say, if it's something that can be enforced, we take it to the right enforcement agencies, we get that enforced. If it's something that, for example, if you live in California or here on the West Coast, many states here do not have very many regulations. You may say, well, there's nothing there that we can specifically enforce. If you can expose these things, many times there are legal actions that can be taken. My last thought before I hand it off to Kathy. Over the last few weeks, I've been very fortunate to get to cross paths with a number of the largest philanthropists who pour money into the pro-life movement. Incredibly generous people that take the gift that they've been given, their finances, and they invest into many of the organizations that you see here. Two of the conversations I've had, one of them with a man who's poured $45 million into pro-life efforts over the last 15 years, another one with somebody who is part of a foundation that's doing amazing work. They both said the biggest opportunity that is not being leveraged to its fullest in the pro-life movement right now is legal and enforcement. And I could not agree more. So it's not going to sound as glamorous and exciting as let's go out and stand at a vigil or let's do something on campus with a big educational display. But if your goal is I want to see lives saved, I want to see these facilities closed, this could be the breakthrough that your community needs. So with that, I just want you to get your mindset. This is crucial information, and one of the best people I have ever met in the United States of America comes to us from Indiana. She is a dear friend, a colleague, and I am so excited about what God is doing through her and the work she's doing, and that's Kathy Humbarger. So I'll turn it over to Kathy.
Thank you so much, David. I hope I live up to that really nice introduction. As David indicated, we are sharpening the axe, as someone referred to earlier today, to chop down the tree, and we need to raise up an army. As David indicated, this is going to take a lot of work, and the people in this room are the ones that we're looking to help us. So as any army is raised up, we need to do some vetting. So if you have ever had a speeding ticket, raise your hand. If you ever should have had a speeding ticket, raise your hand. Going the wrong way here? There we go. We certainly understand that there are many laws on the books. As a matter of fact, people have done studies on this very thing. And this is just one example. This author claims that every one of us breaks 3 federal laws every day. That's a lot. Why aren't we all arrested? How long can you drive on an expired driver's license? Until you get caught. And that's what enforcement is all about. I've got to get my right hand brain, left brain going here. As was referred to earlier, Father Pavone said that it's impossible to practice vice virtuously. My definition of vice is abortion. And lay this on top of the fact that we just discussed previous to this, that we all break 3 federal laws every day. The stage is set for us to catch abortion businesses breaking laws. So what is this tool called enforcement? Let me tell you a little bit about it. Enforcement is very, very simple, yet a little bit like watching paint dry. There are people, though, that are called to do this, and I think some of them are in this room. It's a very simple template. We review existing laws and code. We determine who is the enforcement authority for supervising and carrying out and enforcing these codes and these laws. We research and review enforcement procedures and records requests. We pass and amend legislation. We're proactive, and we pray. A few weeks ago, I was struggling with if this was really, really what God wanted me to do. I'm probably twice, maybe 3 times the age of most of you in this room. I've been at abortion advocacy for well over 30 years. And I was just struggling. I said, Lord, is this really how you want me to spend the next 10 or so productive years that you have for me? And I came across this verse. So do not be afraid of them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. So that was my answer. And I hope this will pierce your heart as well. The Lord wants us to expose evil. The Lord wants us to be the biggest harassers of abortion providers in this country. We are recruiting an army of abortion facility harassers. Will you join me? Will you be part of this? We could be the turning point in history where the simple things that we do actually crumble the wall, the foundation of the abortion business. And I know many of you were not yet born when the Berlin Wall came down. Those in my generation thought we would never see that. It was up day after day after day after day. And suddenly, it crumbled almost overnight. And I believe it crumbled because of the relentless efforts of people like us gathered in this room that finally saw that wall come down. Will you be a part of the relentless effort to see the abortion business die literally by 1,000 cuts? Will you be part of this? We need you. So let's look a little bit more closely at our tools. This is, I don't know how well you can see it, but this is a termination of pregnancy report. In Indiana and many other states, the abortionist has to complete a form like this for every abortion that's done. And we can get a wealth of information from this document. It has no identifying information, so there are no HIPAA laws violated. The mother's name's not on it, her address is not on it, social security number is not on it. But some of the things that we've learned from these reports is that underage abortions were being performed on little girls under the age of 14 in the state of Indiana and other places in this country. And that they were never being reported to the authorities. So these little girls were being sent right back into the same situation without any authorities being notified so that their misery and the attacks on their precious little bodies would be stopped. We filed complaints on these kinds of violations, these egregious violations. Not one complaint did the job, but 2,000 complaints for this violation and many others finally got the attention of the people in charge of health regulations, and this abortionist was finally shut down. His 3 abortion facilities either had their facility license terminated, revoked, or he chose not to apply for a renewal. One of the reasons that this egregious abortion provider, Dr. Ulrich Klopfer, closed his doors is because in one of his facilities, in the basement, with only one stairway to get up and down, is where he had his procedure room. That's where the little babies were ripped apart, torn limb from limb, and discarded with surgical waste. When the inspectors went in, they found a regular household extension cord strung through a puddle of water, and that was providing the electricity that was operating the suction machine in that rat hole. Unless we find out these egregious violations and bring it to the attention of those in charge, these conditions will continue. Additional things that we find on a termination of pregnancy report are the name of the abortionist, the name of the facility, and abortionists who do abortions beyond the length of time that's allowed in that particular state. The next piece of information is a sample of a facility inspection. So in many states there are required by law inspections of abortion facilities. I know that's not the case here in California. However, I want to show you some of the egregious violations that we have found from these inspection reports. Number one, all medical records reviewed failed to provide a 24-hour number for the physician or facility to the patient. Also failed to provide patient with the name or number of the hospital nearest her residence. As we know, abortion can result in complications. This poor woman was sent home with no directions as to what she should do in case of a complication. Number two, broken light box in a pathology room. Patient exam cables had no electrical safety testing. Imagine laying on an abortion table and being shocked and maybe even electrocuted as the procedure is going on because there had been no electrical safety testing. Countertops had formica pulling away from the service. Crash carts were unlocked and not maintained. Equipment was not sterilized properly. Sterilization labels were not properly filled in with the time, label number, etc. Pre-filled syringes were open and accessible to patients. We found in one situation where aborted babies' body parts were kept in a refrigerator with other medications. Rusty surgical equipment, and we're talking about the suction machine that is used to do surgical abortions. It was rusty, folks. Holes in the flooring allowing rats to enter. Breaks in the vinyl on treatment tables, which allowed bodily fluids to seep into the foam and not be able to be cleaned. Missing drugs, opioids. Wonder where they went. Dirty countertops where aborted babies' bodies are sorted. So these and other violations we found from reviewing inspection reports, not just in the state of Indiana, but in other states as well. Now I'd like to tell you the story about Whole Women's Health, and I realize I need to hurry, or we're not going to have very much time left for... I don't know if any of you remember a Supreme Court decision that was handed down in June of 2016. It was called the Hellerstedt decision. This was a very, very significant Supreme Court decision. An abortion chain by the name of Whole Woman's Health started in Texas. The Texas legislature passed some common sense regulations for abortion facilities. One required the abortionist to have admitting privileges at a hospital in close proximity to where the abortions were performed, and the other one required the abortion facilities to follow surgical center regulations. Those were passed by the Texas legislature and signed into law by the governor. Immediately, the law was challenged in court by Whole Woman's Health. This is extremely important to remember because this case made its way through the legal system. One court finding for the state, one court finding for the Whole Woman's Health abortion chain. But the important thing to know is that the Supreme Court handed down a decision in favor of Whole Woman's Health. Now this is particularly important because what that Supreme Court decision requires now is that every court that is looking at enforcement regulations that are being challenged in their courts will be viewed through the lens of the Hellerstedt decision. And by the way, Hellerstedt was the name of the Department of Health head in the state of Texas. So on June 27, 2016, in a 5-3 decision, the Texas enforcement law was struck down. There's a picture of Amy Hagstrom Miller. She's the founder of Whole Woman's Health in Texas. And she said what happens in Texas won't stay in Texas, and did she ever mean it? A regular review of our abortion facility license application in the state of Indiana showed that in October of this year, Whole Woman's Health filed to open an abortion facility in the state of Indiana. Fortunately, because we had a proactive procedure in place, we were able to find out about that license before it was granted. This book is the research that was completed by me and my team in the state of Indiana about Whole Woman's Health. It includes a whole section of violations from other states, in addition to some very egregious information about the way Whole Woman's Health planned to do business in the state of Indiana. We were able to get this into the hands of the proper authorities, and the abortion facility license was denied by the State Department of Health in Indiana. The story does not end there. The Whole Woman's Health had a certain amount of time to file for an appeal before an administrative law judge. And we found out on January 22nd, just last week, and isn't it odd that they chose January 22nd, they filed an appeal to the decision that the Indiana State Department of Health made. Indiana is committed to make certain that we follow this through to the end and that that decision to deny their license stands. And the reason this is so important is because Whole Woman's Health released a press release saying that they chose Indiana because of our very common sense enforcement laws. They plan to challenge them in court when they have legal standing to do abortions in the state of Indiana, and if we lose there, this will sweep across the country. So we must win in Indiana. And in case you think that this kind of enforcement only works in the state of Indiana, this is what the court decision did. I'm getting behind here on myself. Illinois, which is almost as liberal as California, maybe not quite, but they have seen abortion facilities shut down. Complained about no registered nurse at the Rockford Clinic, closed down that Rockford Clinic, and that's one of just 2 or 3 that have been closed down in the state of Illinois. In Pennsylvania, we all know about Pennsylvania, but the Hillcrest abortion facility's license was revoked as a result of complaints. So this is something that can be done everywhere, and it just doesn't have to be abortion law. It can be things like fire codes, occupancy requirements, surgical medical waste disposal, all kinds of things. So we have a tool, folks, that we can use. And I want to hurry along here, but I do want to tell you that not only, here's some of the headlines when the abortion facility license was denied. We've got to keep Whole Women's Health out of business, not only in Indiana, but across the country, and close other egregious abortion providers. And the important thing to understand is that we're doing God's work. God tells us to fight evil, expose evil. We can't do that alone. If you think that there's nothing you can do, that is absolutely not true. I have a whole handout, a list of things you can do on a handout. If you see me after the presentation, I'll be glad to give it to you, along with my contact information. One person can make a difference. I'm just a little uneducated girl from southern Indiana, and the Lord has given me the opportunity to go across the country talking about this. And so every one of you has a role to play in this. We all look to Roe versus Wade to be overturned as our bar of success. But let me tell you, every time a complaint is filed, an abortion facility has to pay a fine, Roe is overturned. Every time we can keep an abortion business out of business for even a day or two, and the babies are saved, Roe is overturned. Every time we can see an abortion facility shut down because of the number of violations that have been brought to light, Roe is overturned. There are many, many ways that we can achieve the goal the Lord has put before us. This is His fight. He will equip us for the battle. Will you join me? Will you be the biggest harasser of the abortion business in the United States? See me after the session. I'll be glad to sign you up for this army. God bless.
Good to be with you. It's working? Okay. Well, folks, it's good to be with you. I had terrible news at the beginning. We had something bordering on cruel and unusual punishment. You had lunch and you were going to listen to a lawyer for 15 minutes. But we're going to save 10 minutes for questions, so I will try and get through this quickly. My name is Ken Conley. I'm a litigation or legal counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom. We litigate cases surrounding abortion, free speech and abortion clinics, and pregnancy resource centers, pro-life centers, and we also have a legislative arm where we try and get laws passed that whittle away at Roe. I'll start with what seems to be a strange way to start, what I'll call the litigator's disclaimer, and that is this. Litigation is a sort of clumsy way to move the culture along, right? Law follows culture. In other words, if you see a case come down, it's probably likely that the case came down after the culture changed, right? If you look at Roe, Roe doesn't happen unless the culture is already degraded, right? And Roe's not going to go away unless we recapture the culture. Give you a quick example. I litigated same-sex marriage cases for 4 years. Now, no matter what your position is on that issue, and there may be different positions out there in this room, whatever your position is on that, this can't be denied. When I came into that battle 4 or 5 years ago, the law was against same-sex marriage proponents, experience was against them, history was against them, common sense was against them, and science was against them. And yet, over that 4-year period, even in casual conversations with friends or relatives, as the cases progressed, you would hear, what do you think about same-sex marriage? Well, of course it should be allowed. Of course it's legal. Of course, right? They had captured the culture. And I can tell you it made it very easy for courts to then fall in line, right? Now, if you take the obverse here, think about Roe. We in the pro-life movement have the law on our side. There's nothing in the Constitution that requires a right to abortion. We have science on our side. We know that's life from conception. We have history, experience, common sense on our side, right? So if we capture the culture, the law will follow. Okay, so that being said, winning the culture war is what will do the trick. I encourage you folks, we're doing everything we can to be as proactive as we can with laws and fighting the battles in the courtroom. But don't wait for the little scroll on CNN or Fox News to say, everyone's pro-life now. That's everyone in this room's job, make that happen. Let me talk about some of the cases we have quickly so I can get some questions. 3 cases that are current that I want to just sort of use to let you know how we can impact the industry and what your role can be on sort of a retail politics or retail pro-life basis. What I mean by retail is one person to one person. NIFLA. NIFLA case is actually going up to SCOTUS Supreme Court in March. We'll hear that case. That is a law out of California, right here, that essentially tells pro-life pregnancy clinics to put up advertisements for free abortions when people come into pro-life clinics. In other words, as soon as they come in, you have to tell them you can go get a free abortion over at the state. Most of you can probably tell that's not only intuitively unfair, but also it's unconstitutional. You can't compel the speech of another. What would your role in this be? When you look at court decisions, a lot of times courts will grab onto what we call the legislative record, and they'll say, look, there's evidence in the record. There's a report from NARAL, or the Hastings College of Law, that says these PRCs, these pro-life clinics, are deceiving women, right? And they latch onto that. That may be the only thing in the record. A real practical way you can affect these laws so that they don't get passed under the color of night, right, is show up at these hearings. I can't tell you how important that is. It sounds trite to say, be more politically engaged. Show up, believe me. These laws that get passed under nightfall right? There should be a cost to pass laws that lead to the deaths of children, okay? So show up for those. Another type of case is, we've got a case called Bruni v. City of Pittsburgh. That'll be going up to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. That's what we call a buffer zone case. You've probably heard of those, where if you're doing pro-life counseling or praying outside a pregnancy clinic, or Planned Parenthood rather, municipalities often try and cabin your ability to do that. They push you out to the periphery. Again, same type of counsel from me on that one. Show up to these hearings. They happen in your towns, they happen in your cities, and what happens is they very quickly can get passed. A lot of times we don't hear about them until it's too late. When I said the law is clumsy, what I meant by that is a lot of times we're like a MASH unit or a triage, right? We don't get to fix something until something's terribly injured, right? But you guys are on the front lines of the culture. Fix it before it breaks, I guess is what I would say. Last case, these are a little bit more few and far between, but Thayer v. Planned Parenthood. Sue Thayer had worked at Planned Parenthood for decades. While she was there, she and a lot of the other employees came across what appeared to be some lax compliance with state and federal regulations. It's called the False Claims Act case. For those of you who have taken Latin, I'm not going to butcher it, but it's a key tam case. It's another way to talk about it. Essentially, it's he who sues for himself or herself also sues for the king. So people can bring cases in these key tam or false claim cases if you know somebody who's worked at a Planned Parenthood, or the things that Kathy's talking about, if you know somebody who has inside scoop on how Planned Parenthood might be submitting false claims to the government for reimbursement. That is a quick way to get to the bottom line, okay, of Planned Parenthood. If you know, and all these laws that they pass, if you think about it, are related to the bottom line. To the extent they can get a pro-life pregnancy clinic to say, you go get a free abortion there, they increase their bottom line and they cut into your ability to affect the culture, right? To the extent they can keep you from praying or keeping a woman from going to a Planned Parenthood clinic, they get one more customer. So all these things affect the bottom line. Having said that, I think we give you some time for questions. I'll cut it short.
How about a big round of applause for our panel? So we just have time for one really good question. So does anyone have anything that's burning inside of them? Okay, that's quick.
So I'm not very familiar with each of the laws in our individual states on these things. But, I mean, since you talked about different ways we can get into the Planned Parenthoods and other facilities, how are we going to check things, like besides people on the inside, how are we going to check that they're disposing of their waste correctly? How do we get access to, like, or do we even have access to all those forms with the ages on them? Like, where do we start?
That's a really good question. All across the country, there are procedures to get government documents, and that's what these are, with identifying information redacted. So there's a procedure that may vary from state to state. Some places it's called the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. Some places it's called requesting public information documents. So there's a variety of ways, but records that are collected by the government are accessible to the citizens upon request with identifying information redacted. So that's something that I would hope the teams in the states that we're hoping will rise up all across this country will investigate, and I'm available to coach anybody who's interested in finding out how to do that in their own state. And I'll have a handout for you with my contact information if you're interested.
Does anyone else have a question?
My question's for the gentleman to the right. You said the way to overturn these laws would be to sort of influence the culture. So what would be some brief ways that you think that would influence the culture in order to overturn these laws?
Well, I mean, again, I think it has to be retail, right? When I say retail politics, right? Every interaction you have with someone has to be a courageous interaction. I know it sounds trite, it sounds too simplistic. I'll give you a quick example. My wife works at a restaurant, right? And a girl said, I think I might be pregnant, okay? And she said, but I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. And my wife said, well, whatever you do, you know, I can help you, that type of stuff, right? The girl seemed still sort of on the fence. She said, came in the next day and said, well, my boyfriend doesn't want the baby. And my wife said, all right, well, let's talk. Don't do anything yet, let's talk. She said, I can hook you up with people who will take care of the baby. We'll adopt the baby. She said, we, meaning my family, will adopt the baby. And, you know, unfortunately, the story didn't have a happy ending. And that's notwithstanding, my wife didn't stop there. She came home from work, my wife was crying. She said, well, what do? I don't want to hound her, but do you think it'd be too much to send her another text? So she sent her a long text. And again, it turned out to be to the point where the girl actually, you know, and I don't blame the girl. She was obviously distraught, and she had no support from her boyfriend. But she got angry with my wife, and then started to tell people at work that my wife would try to influence her decision, that type of thing. And I said to my wife, I said, listen, if you get fired because we offer to adopt the child, then it's a happy firing. Everybody does that, right? You'll see, you're all in school, for instance. I remember all the way up through undergrad, master's, and law school, you find people who are, I would call sort of culturally weak, right? Or they haven't been formed on these issues. And I call them fellow travelers, in terms of many guys will, in discussions, will say, oh, well, it's a woman's right to do whatever she wants. Who am I to say? I'm just a guy, right? Obviously, it's a ridiculous argument. Who are you to say you can be the one to help the woman, right? Even if you're not her boyfriend. So I guess what I would say is that those types of retail things, just in personal interactions, are the way you turn a culture. Again, if you think about the same-sex marriage battle, they didn't win that. And when I say win, I'm talking about temporarily, right? That fight isn't over, I don't think. But they didn't win that battle by writing fancy articles or by going to, you know, giant conventions and saying, you know, we've got all the money we want. They won it by convincing people bit by bit by bit by bit. And that's the way we have to do it. We basically, this is going to be over your heads. If anybody's ever heard of Betamax, right? Betamax. We want to basically, or a typewriter. You basically want to reduce the demand to the point where people, when it comes up, why would I ever need an abortion? There's people over here who can help me. There's people over here who can help me. There's no stigma in having a child. And it has to come it has to come person to person. There's no fancy way to do it. I'm sorry I don't have a quick legal answer. Like I said, we can do what we can do in the courts, but it's an extremely clumsy way to do it. That only happens after you guys have already done the work. And I've done the work, and my wife has done the work. Everybody has to do it.
Well, this is so exciting because we can see that we have this abortion industry in front of us, but...
Can I just add something really quick to his answer? That was beautiful. But another thing that you can do is talk to somebody that has lived through abortion, that has experienced having an abortion and the trauma that it caused them in their life, and know their heart and their pain, and know so enough that you can tell somebody else when you're talking to them one-on-one, I have this friend, and she told me all about it. She told me what it did to her in her life and the trauma that it caused her. Talk to people like that. And that way you know what they've gone through, so that you can talk to somebody on a personal level and encourage them not to go there.
Yes, thank you very much. So what's so exciting is we have this abortion industry in front of us, but it is crumbling. And what we saw on this stage today is that they can each person can play a different role in that. So how about one more big round of applause before our next